loop into the deep core. Yo, what's up? It's someone that's no one here, and welcome to today's report. Now, this isn't necessarily a report more than it is a scientific statement, I guess you can say. And this is coming from Emergence from Erowid. This happened in 2012. The drugs used, we got quite a bit of different combinations here, as you can probably tell from the title. Nitrous oxide with LSD or DMT, and we have ketamine with LSD or DMT. Age 25. The dose, LSD was always at 150 micrograms, the DMT was always 50 milligrams, and the ketamine 60 milligrams, and the nitrous was 2 canisters. And the prior experience, this was done by a group of individuals, and I assume they at least have a fair amount to significant psychedelic experience. And where this happened, it happened in a controlled, safe environment. So that's all the info we got for this one. It's a pretty interesting, I guess you can say, study, or whatever you might want to call this. But I think you guys will find it interesting, and I believe some of you guys could add to this as well, as you will see here shortly. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. This is less a specific trip report and more an argument for the existence of a particular phenomena brought on by a combination of 1. Either of 2 dissociative anesthetics with 2. Either DMT or LSD. Obviously, it is largely unknown and unacknowledged by the general public. Despite this, in my experience of seeing 15 or so individuals, males and females, aged 17 to 28, often repeatedly ingest the required components, without exception, all acknowledge the significance of the event. Further, all who tried more than one of the possible combinations found a comparison between them inescapable. It is my hope that careful, responsible, and scientific psychonauts out there will verify the existence of this territory, as well as explore the extent of its possibilities. All combinations undertaken here were done in a safe, indoor, or secluded environment, with trust and love between all those present. More often than not, a sober trip sitter was present to handle any unexpected complications, and benzodiazepines, most often diazepam, lorazepam, and or alprazolam, were kept on hand as a last resort parachute for bad trip emergencies. Under these conditions, the results seem both repeatable and relatively safe, with no extreme physical or psychological injuries having ever occurred to date. Attempts to describe the actual experience are doomed to failure, because the synergy produces effects that operate on dimensions that are simply inaccessible to language. One might try to say things like, "I became one with everything," or "unraveled into the essence of total, perfect nothing." Though incompatible, both are just as valid descriptors of the event I refer to here. I will list the combination by dissociative, to hallucinogen, number of people who I have seen try it, and unanimously agree that the trip produced was one of special, almost sacred importance. Approximate doses required to guarantee the effect, and a short description. Nitrous oxide. With acid, 5 took part, doing a full balloon, 2 cartridges, while peaking on 150 micrograms. The loop. Produces what can only be described as a hallucination of a reality that both underpins and invalidates true reality. That or total ego loss, take your pick, done simultaneously in a group for some seriously interesting and impossible results. With DMT, 2 took part, freebase a breakthrough dose, 50 milligrams, while inhaling 2 cartridges. This one is difficult to do without passing out before accomplishing it. Most of the successes have been with smoking the DMT first, and using a trip sitter. When kaleidoscopic visuals start blotting out reality, we trade pipe with balloon from sitter. Difficult to do, more than worth it for the result. Ketamine. With acid, 6 took part, doing a strong dose, 60 milligrams without tolerance, of ketamine during the peak of a 150 microgram trip. This was my first introduction to the phenomena, and I don't recommend it. I will remember the experience for the rest of my life. It was gut-wrenchingly difficult and seemed highly dangerous. The problem, I think, lies in the duration of the 2 drugs combined with a lack of full-on unconsciousness. For what seems an eternity, I was halfway between worlds. unable to walk, and cannot be certain which factors belong where. It was extremely important to not act when in doubt, because the world that I was interacting with is not the one I was perceiving. With DMT, a different two took part, taking a strong 60 milligram dose of K and attempt to break through 50 milligrams freebasing DMT. This one is noticeable even at lower dosages of either ingredient, and immensely pleasurable. I would be so bold as to call it the speedball of the psychonaut, bearing in mind the metaphor makes a conversion between physical and spiritual psychology. Both nitrous and K have been tried a few times in combination with psilocybe cubensis without the same result. I fully admit I have very limited knowledge of this unexplored nexus, and cannot even guess as to how many other compounds would produce combinations with similar results. What I can say with certainty is that the interaction between the four aforementioned substances produces effects that, while different in scale and many indescribable qualities, are in their essence very similar, and without question the most hauntingly unique and incredible exposure to what I can only describe as magic or spirit, despite my scientific background and convictions. I wish I could better describe the feeling, but a certain circle I was a part of called it the loop, referring primarily to LSD nitrous, and had a continuous debate on whether things like prophecy, shared consciousnesses, and body switching occurred or not, to the point that sessions were taped and some experiments were conducted, with frustrating results. For instance, I once had a prophetic vision that two of my good friends, who were at the time happily living together, would separate. Naturally, I told no one, and did everything I could to prevent it from becoming true, but it happened nonetheless. This is just one example, but it produced a long-standing personal debate. Did I reinvent the memory after the fact, or, despite my conscious resistance, was the delusion a self-fulfilling prophecy? Did I reinvent my immediate writing down the next prediction after the fact? Are the predictions actually banal and obvious, even though everyone appears shocked when they come to fruition? Such bizarre questions await those who would mess with the fabric of this paradoxical mixture. My personal favorite of these recipes would have to be DMT NTO. It is both the most difficult to engineer and the most effortlessly and breathtakingly wonderful mental state I have ever found myself in. I regularly, though not always, make contact with one of two archetypical entities: the architect, an asexual and transdimensional alien god who often shows me inconceivable technologies, viewpoints, and structures made of light; the fairy goddess, who is the embodiment of beauty, joy, and love, and who acts flirtatiously, passionate, mischievous, painfully true, and loving, compared to the architect, who is the only mental construct I'm able to compare her to. She is Eros incarnate. I make no claims about the objective existence of these beings, but I would say that from my tiny and limited viewpoint, they seem as hauntingly real today as they did when I met them, much to the chagrin and constant challenging of my logical mind. Fortunately, there seems, for me at least, zero permanent psychological or functional impairments resulting from these persisting delusions, only reflective and fascinating entertainment of biblical proportions. So, like I said, this is a really interesting study rather than experience, even though it is, an experience too, a more of a collective experience. But I wish I could add specifically to these substances, but I haven't tried any of these in combination yet. And what I can comment on here, though, is some prior experience with DXM, another widely known drug of the dissociative class, in combination with LSD, and another more obscure psychedelic, not too obscure, DPT. Now, what I can relate from my experience to the statements made in this report is the grand significance of the experience. When I tripped off those combinations, it brought me to a more intense, beyond words point of being, sometimes sending me into complete ego death, and others just a strong mouthful of psychedelia. The appearance and or presence of entities were often common, and they would seem to represent some sort of emotion, like intelligence or love, as mentioned by Emergence with his entities. Part of me, though, thinks that these are just different parts of the brain that are being hallucinated, which it may be, but I also think it may be connected to the collective consciousness in a way. Then with the prophetic visions, it's also something I personally experience and still continue to experience. I feel like I have seen my whole life laid out during a trip, and I already have a rough idea for a lot that's going to happen. But I myself, I don't get too ahead of myself with this and get all magic like this is the truth, like set in stone, because like he said, it very well may just be a delusion or just a coincidence. But the thing is, when you're tripping, you're open to the idea that anything is possible. So who really knows though? Maybe we stepped out to the fourth plane and saw it from the fifth. And I have had this combination with other people, and I did perceive a shared consciousness, but I've also had the same thing occur on psychedelics alone. But I think one of the things that we can say for sure and we can take from this study / experience is, with this combination, it's oftentimes more significant and more powerful than just doing psychedelics alone. Obviously, combinations are a much more obscure study, and we still have yet to explore the full potential of these compounds just on their own. But maybe with the combination with dissociative and psychedelic, we are opening different doorways to walk through, and it may be more effective in its own right for other purposes. So like I said, I would really like to hear some things from you guys, if you ever had this combination, what it was like, what stood out to you, was it incomprehensible and whatnot, what can you relate to this experience really? I would love to hear it, and I'm sure Emergence would appreciate it as well, get some more feedback, if he ever finds this video, that is. But if you guys enjoyed this video, like the video, subscribe. It's been your boy, Someone That's Someone, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.